If you need someone to write the paper, you get a 7 to 10 in Fact Finder like me. If you need just the headline, you're going to get someone in the 1 to 3 range. And if you need the paragraph or one-page summary, then we'll get someone like the two of you in the 4 to 6 range.
Welcome to Powered by Instinct, a podcast for professionals who think about how your fundamental nature drives performance. If you're interested in getting more done more naturally, then let's jump in.
Welcome to the Powered by Instinct podcast. I'm Nicole Loucks. I'm the Director of Training here at Kolbe Corp, as well as our VP of Youth and Education. My MO is 5824. Today, we have a very fun episode. We're going to be talking about Kolbe Action Modes, and we're going to do a deep dive into one of our action modes, Fact Finder. And for those of you who don't know what action mode is, do not worry, we're going to talk all about that. First, let me introduce my co-hosts for today, Stephanie Clergé and Eric Herrera.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello, everybody.
So Stephanie and Eric spend a ton of time working with people and organizations, and they get to help them use their instinctive strengths really, really well. So you guys are in for a treat. Stephanie, your MO is 8363, and Eric, you are a 5392. So I'm sure that'll come up a bunch today. Let's go ahead and start at the beginning. So Stephanie, can you give us an idea about what even is this thing called Kolbe? What are we measuring?
Sure. Well, the Kolbe Index tells us about how we naturally take action, and specifically when we're striving. So that means when we're taking action on purpose, so not just out of habit or based on our experiences or purely based on our emotions or personality. It's how we creatively solve problems and make decisions. And really, it's about how we get things done. So just for Eric to say that even more simply, right? If you think of the 3 parts of the mind, thinking, feeling, and doing, at Kolbe, we tell you about that 3rd part of the mind, the cognitive part, how you execute, how you get things done.
So Eric, can you go ahead and talk to us about each of the different action modes and what that even means?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Stephanie mentioned, right, overall at Kolbe, it's all about how do you get stuff done, or the doing part of the mind. And it turns out we all take action in 4 separate ways. So the one we're going to talk about today is that red one called Fact Finder. To get stuff done, we all have to gather information. Then there's that blue one called Follow Through. We all have to deal with systems and processes, and then also bring things to closure. That green one, Quick Start, it's all about dealing with risk and uncertainty. And then that yellow one, Implementor, it's all about the physical world around us, space and tangibles.
So we are going to touch on the very first line that you're going to come to in your Kolbe A index result, that red line, and it's called Fact Finder. So Stephanie, can you tell us about the different parts of the Fact Finder action modes and kind of a brief overview of what they mean?
Well, as you'll soon see, I'm an 8 in Fact Finder, so I'm not sure brief is going to be what is going to happen, but sure, I would love to talk a little bit more about it. So Fact Finder, as we talked about, is one of the 4 Kolbe action modes, and it is really all about how we gather and share information. It's about how we naturally deal with details, how specific or how thorough we are. Each of the action modes, including Fact Finder, are on a continuum from 1 to 10. We break that up into 3 different zones. So on one end of that continuum, there are strengths in the 7 to 10 range, where we naturally initiate action or get the problem-solving process started. And so the Fact Finder in the 7 to 10 range has a strength that we call Specify. People with this strength tend to get really specific. They ask a lot of questions and dig into the details. They gather as much information as possible before getting started on a task. Some of them might do this through traditional research methods like reviewing documents or reading books, but you can also get information by talking to people. So that's really in the 7 to 10 range. Then in the 1 to 3 range, on the other end of the continuum, we call that great strength Simplify in the Fact Finder mode. This strength really kind of exists because if everybody gathered and shared information to a great degree of detail like I do, then we would get mired in the details. We would fall into analysis paralysis. So we have folks with this strength on the other side of the continuum in that 1 to 3 range who naturally simplify. They keep things high level. They really look at the big picture. They naturally summarize information and avoid the need to justify all of the decisions that they make with data. And so you'll want someone like this on your team to keep your meetings or emails from being too long. Right, Eric?
Exactly.
So then we've got the 3rd set of strengths in Fact Finder, which is in the middle range and in the 4 to 6 range. And this is a strength we call explain. So this is an amazing strength as well because they're really in the middle. So their talent is really to make sure that they don't over explain or oversimplify. They're going to get just the essential facts, and they're going to be great at fact checking or editing. And they're really going to work well within priorities that have already been set and react to needs that come about when gathering information. So they're really great bridge between the two other strengths on that fact finder continuum. I think that's covers it, right?
That was excellent. I don't know if that was a brief overview, but it was certainly a great overview.
I
Stephanie.
told you, I tried to warn you.
Yeah, and part of the reason Nicole and I are here is we're both fives in Fact Finder, right? So really, if you need to know what you really need to know, ask one of the two of us. If you need the Encyclopedia Britannica version, you ask Stephanie, and she will absolutely give you that.
All right. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to take this from the two of you. So I'm going to do this again. So I like to say about the 3 fact finder strengths. If you need someone to write the paper, you get a 7 to 10 in fact finder like me. If you need just the headline, you're going to get someone in the 1 to 3 range. And if you need the paragraph or 1-page summary, then we'll get someone like the two of you in the 4 to 6 range. So how's that for brief?
There we go. Awesome.
That was excellent. Excellent. And what I love that you said is you talked about all of those strengths truly as strengths. Each one of the 3 has something amazing to contribute. So I really want to dig into each of those strengths and talk about how would we coach them? What are some things that we might come up with? Because you're going to deal with those individuals differently, right? So let's start with that first initiating zone, that 7 through 10, the people who specify naturally. How are we going to coach somebody in this zone, Eric?
So I'm going to actually take a step back a little bit and just let's look at this broadly, regardless of what your numbers are, 1, 5, 10, somewhere in between. You're your best you when you lean into that strength, when you see it as a strength. So if you're a 7, 8, 9, do more of that is kind of the broad guidance that I would give you if I was coaching you. So if you're a 7, 8, 9, or 10, then my coaching advice is ask a bunch of questions. Get everything that you need in order to get started, because if you don't, that's sometimes where you get stuck, or you're always left with, well, wait a minute, what about? And so it seems as though you're not jumping in on projects, you're just missing information. So empower yourself to ask more questions and get the info that you need.
How come you never coach me that way, Eric?
Well, there's practical limits, right?
And I love this because we're going to talk a little bit later about when you have differing strengths in Fact Finder, like you, Stephanie, and you, Eric, and me, what does that really look like? And how does that sort of play out in a workplace environment? So excellent. Do you have anything to add, Stephanie? How would you coach somebody in this zone?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric covered it. Really, most of the coaching that we end up doing is really about when you're in relationship with other people. I do think that because the world really talks a lot about gathering and sharing information, people in Fact Finder in the 7 to 10 really kind of have the strength dialed in. It's really when they're working with others that they need a little bit more of that coaching. And I know we'll get to that.
So what's likely to take the person out of their zone or be kind of a barrier to using their strengths, or when they kind of just won't take action at all? Like how does that work? And what are things that would likely lead to that person kind of procrastinating or deciding not to do something?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, and then obviously Stephanie, throw in as needed. I think there's a couple of things that cause it. I think sometimes if you're in an environment, if you're in a culture where it's, hey, we don't need to worry about that stuff. Let's just move forward. We don't need to do any research. Then you sometimes start to see that strength as a deficiency, where actually you're the one that can help protect everybody by doing some of that homework, doing some of that research. And I touched on it earlier, but if you don't have all that information, that's actually what causes you to procrastinate. You don't have everything you need. You haven't analyzed it enough to say, yes, this is a good idea. Let's go forward and make it happen.
Yeah, well, and a practical example of that is if you're in a meeting and the meeting is 60 minutes long, or you only have 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is, to discuss a specific topic, and you don't have time to ask the questions that you had on your mind, or you don't have time to go and fact check or get a little bit of data in order to make decisions, right? You have to make a decision right now. Give us a yes or no. And it's like, I haven't had a chance to look into this at all. So, some of the kinds of coaching we give people are, give the agenda ahead of time, those kinds of things, so that people can go get their research done, or maybe have a separate session for questions so that people have a chance to ask their questions, but don't bog down the meeting. So it's that kind of stuff that I know will really get me. If you don't allow me to ask questions, you don't allow me to do the research, or you force me to only use your data source and don't let me kind of dig into my own, those are the kind of things that really get to me as a 8 in fact finder.
So you kind of segued into this, or you kind of mentioned this actually as being in meetings. How would a initiating fact finder, so someone in that 7 through 10 range, tend to communicate that information or need that information communicated to them?
Well, Eric might say I'm long-winded, which is partially personality too, right? I'm relatively outgoing when I'm with people that I'm comfortable with. So I do tend to talk a lot, but not everyone who's in the 7 to 10 range in Fact Finder talks a lot. But you're probably going to get more lengthy emails or lengthier documents or those kinds of things. Often they're going to document. Kathy Kolbe will say that, someone in the 7 to 10 range in Fact Finder doesn't feel useful unless they have a pen or something to write with in their hand. And that's definitely true for me. I need to document, and I refer to documents as well. The written word is often going to be something that you're going to see in terms of communication and whatever that looks like. So data, whether it's a survey from individuals, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I think Eric and I have both received some wonderful emails from you that we affectionately call love notes, where we could both attest to that being how you naturally communicate, for sure. So how do you think this strength shows up in kids? Because what we know is that this does not change over time. Someone who has a 7 through 10 in Fact Finder is someone who naturally specifies, was born like that. This is how they were as a child. And so this is how they are in the workplace as well. It's not a learned behavior over time. So what might we see?
As you think about it, and you mentioned it, Nicole, right? It doesn't change over time. So some of the stuff that you see in grownups that are, let's say, an 8 in Fact Finder, like Stephanie, you would see in little Stephanie when she was 5, 6, 7 years old, running around on the playground, right? So Stephanie naturally gives the verbal version of a 20-page report when you're having a conversation with her. So we didn't grow up together, but I'm guessing little Stephanie on the playground still gave her friends the verbal version of the 20-page report. It was just about, what so-and-so said, or can you believe our teacher asked us to do this assignment? She gave the verbal version of that when she was little Stephanie.
Yeah, I think I always did research. I actually still have my childhood encyclopedias, all of them. And so I was always gathering information. It was always about stuff I was interested in, right? So I wasn't sitting and just reading the encyclopedia. That might be more cognitive. But I would, if there was something I was interested in, I was going to do the research. I was going to go spend time at the library. Or if I had a question, I was going to ask. I was going to stay after class, all of those kinds of things. So really, I needed the detail in order to move forward. And other people just don't need that same level of detail.
When I was teaching, I would see in the classroom students who had this strength. Some of them would ask lots of questions, right? Because how they needed to gather information or even share information they knew was very verbally. Others would do a lot of research on things on their own or ask for extra resources and how to look into things more deeply than we maybe could in class. And so it's interesting because you talk about yourself, Stephanie, and what we know is that, that initiating fact finder strength can show up so differently for different people, depending on their personality and interests and other things. So I'm glad you touched on that. Let's move this party to the other end of the continuum. So these 1 through 3s in Fact Finder, people who naturally simplify. How do we coach these people?
So if you think about a 1 to 3 in Fact Finder, their gift is you can throw that verbal version of the 20-page report at them, and they're able to sort through it, and they pick the most crucial thing, the essence of what you're trying to say. So this is super helpful when you need to relay a bunch of complex information to a broad audience. And so the way I coach these folks is think about, when you're having a conversation, when you're at a team meeting, what's at the heart of the matter? What are we really trying to get done? And latch onto that. Keep the team focused on, hey guys, we're trying to solve for X. And I think we're wandering off the road a little bit. Let's get back on the path to get there.
Yeah. And what happens when you're in environments where maybe that is not appreciated, that strength, or you're expected to potentially get the information, know everything, essentially kind of be an initiating fact finder? How would you coach that person to really be themselves?
Understand that it is a strength and that you don't need to do all that research, do all that homework ahead of time. So that's the first part. Then from there, it's how do you help the rest of the team understand it? And how do you, sometimes if you're in an environment where it's not appreciated to boil things down and people are constantly firing questions at you, it can feel a bit like an interrogation, right? And so just being able to back off and go, wait a minute, okay, it's not a personal attack on me. There's nothing wrong with me. I just have a very different gift. That's where you really should start. And that's the same thing, for small kids, because I know, Nicole, obviously you had kids in your class that had this wildly different strength. And so for them, right, sometimes school is hard because you're doing, these giant outlines and reading through these long, lengthy books. They don't need to do all of that, right? They can skim it and they got enough to make things happen. So again, be proud of it, lean into that strength, and as much as you can, push back when people ask you to give them that long report.
Well, and I think sometimes too, you have to find other individuals who can help you do that, because in certain situations, the data is required, or, you've got to get the book report done or what have you. So maybe you find a different way to do it. Like I know my daughter in school, she's a 3 in fact finder, and she is really looking at audiobooks that she can speed up. So she can just easily speed through it, get the essence. She doesn't have to take any notes. I would be pausing and taking notes throughout. She doesn't do any of that. She listens to it on the fastest speed that she can comprehend. And then if she has certain questions that she has to answer, then she'll go back to those specific parts and then just answer the questions versus slogging through, like might be recommended. Her teacher might say, you've got to outline everything and highlight the stuff. And she doesn't do any of that and can still be successful.
When might a person who has this strength procrastinate or put something off?
So I think, they may procrastinate when they are asked to give more detail, then they naturally are going to gather, right? So if they don't have it and you give them this task and you're like, hey, write the 20-page paper, then they may procrastinate because that just feels pretty overwhelming to them. And like I said, the best way through that is finding some strategies that work, whether it's partnering with other people or there's other different ways to get creative. And that's the great thing about living in the age we're living in. We have so many technology solutions that can help with some of that as well.
And what are going to be some, because I know that you have someone who has a 1 through 3 in fact finder, and somebody is giving them tons and tons of information. You almost see their eyes glaze over. Eric, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. And, sometimes while they may not completely roll their eyes in the back of the head, you do see them start to wander off a little bit. And so you have to be aware of that, right? Read the room, read the other person that you're talking to, but it does become painful. And at a certain point, they just kind of throw their hands in the air. If you keep firing info at them, they're like, forget it. Like, I give up. Whatever you guys come up with is fine with me. And then you miss out on the amazing strengths that person has.
Yeah, well, and I think this is where communication is really important, and being able to, write little scripts for yourself, something that you feel comfortable with saying in a group setting, and really communicating, hey, listen, I know we've got to get this data. I know we have to have this information, but this is really more detail than what I need. So how about I leave, you guys can keep debating this, or you guys can keep gathering more information, and you guys can call me if you need me to come back and simplify or summarize, or I'm going to leave the meeting and I'll catch you guys at the next meeting after that part of it has been done. So you kind of have to not be afraid to stand up for your strengths and really get what you need out of a situation and tell others, this really isn't going to work for me, because you're just wasting your mental energy if you continue to stay in those types of situations.
So now let's talk. So we've talked about the people who are 7, 8, 9s, and 10s who naturally specify, those who naturally simplify 1 through 3. Let's talk about those people who are in that middle area, who are 4, 5s, or 6, who naturally explain. Stephanie, go ahead and start us off. How would you coach somebody in this area?
Yeah, so folks with this great strength of explain are really in a great position, especially when they are working with others, to really give their full contribution. So they really should be listening for what is needed and jump in there. As I mentioned before, one of the things they're really great at is not just, being in between, over explaining and simplifying, but also finding those places where maybe things need to be edited or proofread or something like that. So they can really contribute those great strengths to the group. So that can be great as well. Sometimes people, though, think that any of the strengths that are in the 4 to 6 range, it's like, oh, well, they're smack dab in the middle, so they could just do it all. And so you really have to kind of guard against being treated like a 7 through 10 in fact finder, or being treated like the 1 to 3. They can maybe dip into that occasionally, like we all can. But the 4 to 6 range strength of explain is a strength all in itself, and they will definitely run out of mental energy if they get placed in one or other end of the continuum for too long.
Yeah. And, if somebody's giving you that 20-page report, I think the gift in that 4 to 6 range is you're able to pull out those nuggets, right? Those really impactful pieces. It's almost as if the other stuff is kind of cloudy or murky, and those things just like come at you like really shiny objects, and you can just grab them, right? And it becomes really simple, and you see what those things are. Or the other side, if you're working with a 1, 2, or 3, you're able to take what they come up with and you add some color, some context, kind of shine that nugget up a little bit and make it a little bit better. So yeah, you get to kind of play in both realms. But as Stephanie said, it's not, oh, I can do a whole bunch of information and or I can bottom line because I'm in the middle. No, it's a very different piece where you're pulling from over here or shining this thing up over there.
And I saw this a lot with kids where they could take something that was already written or already sort of produced, a lot of times in a group project or something like that, and they could kind of whittle it down or edit it to make it really, really good. But it was a little bit more difficult for them to either start from scratch or pull out just the one headline. So kind of like where Stephanie started with her brief overview, where that strength is something that shows up a lot of times for kids in school if given the opportunity to kind of collaborate with some other people as well. So now let's talk about what happened. And we don't live in a silo, right? So Stephanie's in Fact Finder does not live all by itself, and she's just in her office all by herself. And Eric and I are doing our own thing. And then anyone who's a 1 through 3, we all have to work together. So let's talk about how the Fact Finder strengths, all 3 of them sort of work in concert in a workplace. So what happens when we have wildly different strengths in Fact Finder? Somebody who's a 1 through 3 simplify, and someone who's a 7, 8, 9, or 10 specify. What does that look like?
In order to work together better, you have to have kind of a baseline or a foundation, right? If we appreciate each other's strengths, you say, hey, you're amazing at this and I'm amazing at this different thing, and we value that in each other. That's really the starting point. Then from there, now we can start to use it to our advantage. So, someone in the 1 to 3 range may go to Stephanie with an 8 and say, hey, Stephanie, I'm thinking of doing this. And then Stephanie's going to go and she's going to figure out, oh, well, here are some of the challenges and here's all of the people that are going to need to be involved. She's going to do all of that research for you. And so that's how you can kind of become a little bit of Batman and Robin, the dynamic duo. So they kind of toss stuff over to Stephanie. She does all the homework. Or when Stephanie is writing something and she's trying to figure out, how do I just make this easier for everybody to understand? Kick it over to that 1, 2, or 3. And again, they're going to pull out that essence and that full love letter that we talked about earlier, right? They're going to boil it down to a bullet point or a phrase.
So Stephanie, let's look at a real example. You and the president of Kolbe Corp, Amy Brewski. Amy is a 3 in Fact Finder and you are an 8, and you work so very closely together. How does that play out for you guys?
Yeah, it plays out a lot like Eric just described, actually. Amy will have an idea or something. Actually, what happens a lot is she will read a book and she will sort of have the essence of what that author was really trying to get across. And I will take some of that content and really flesh it out into a bit more of a training, or I'll, write some of the workbook materials or that kind of thing to go with it. So kind of take that idea, do a little bit of research and extend it into something that's longer and bigger.
And what does Amy bring to the table when kind of like when you're at a point where you might be stuck?
When I'm stuck, that she's really great at reflecting back and saying, okay, so what I hear you saying is this and this and this, right? Like these are the 3 most important things, because Eric did a great job earlier of not saying verbal vomit. I think he said verbal something else, but sometimes it feels like, blah, all this information, right? And so she's really great at just finding those 2 or 3 key points, and then I can go back, right? So if I have a client that I'm working with and, there's a lot of information and a lot of complexity, she's really going to simplify that and remove some of that complexity and kind of give me some key points that I can then go off and decide how much do I need to elaborate. But sometimes when you have lots of information, even as a 7 to 10 in Fact Finder, it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. What happens when you bring somebody in the middle between the 2 of you guys?
Well, I think you should tell us what happens when we bring someone in the middle, because you are often that person. That is why Eric talked about the dynamic duo, but we are, I don't know, the terrific trio or something, because between all 3 of us, we cover all 3 of the strengths in Fact Finder. So having you on our team is just amazing, because really you can bridge those things. So Amy might have an idea. I may have gone and put together 50 slides, and that's probably not an exaggeration. And so you can go through and sort of say, these these are the ones that really seem like they meet the essence of what Amy was trying to get across, right? And just kind of really stand as that great bridge between us. What else do you see as your contributions to our lovely team?
Well, it's so interesting because not unlike probably other people, but it feels very natural for me to do those things. So it doesn't seem like anything special. And so I think that's something we always have to keep in mind. It's like the things that come most natural for you, if you're allowed to do them and encouraged to do them in that way, then it doesn't feel like work all the time. Some of the things I notice the most is that people like you, Stephanie, who have a 7, 8, 9, or 10, and Amy at 1 through 3, sometimes I can tell that you guys are saying the exact same thing. Like you really are talking about the same endpoint. Eric, does this happen to you sometimes too? You're like, wait, you guys, like, we are in agreement. Like you guys are acting like we're not, or, you're sort of maybe digging into the details and someone's trying, but we are in agreement in essence. And it's so funny because I see it so clearly, but yet it's hard. So I do feel like I can help kind of like bridge that gap a little bit and be like, no, this is kind of what Stephanie is saying. This is what Amy is saying. So yeah, we are on track to move forward together. So sometimes it helps with the communication aspect of it. Eric, does that happen to you at all?
Yeah, it definitely does. And yes, I've been in that same room where it seemed they are agreeing and they're saying the same thing, but just in wildly different ways. And so you gotta, as I talked about earlier, kind of pull the pieces from each person and say, look, here's the common ground. And then they go, oh, okay. And then we can all move forward.
Well, and I love that example because we're all managers, we're all leaders in the company. And so you two feel really empowered to make that contribution. But I think what's really important is for other people with the 4 to 6 range who maybe haven't been empowered, haven't been given permission, or don't just naturally take it upon themselves to do that they really make sure that they're volunteering that contribution, because it can be overlooked if you are not assertive enough to actually make it happen. And so I love that.
So let's talk about really briefly, what happens when we have two, let's say, initiating fact finders or two people who have the same MO? How does that play out when working together? So I'm going to take a real life example. Stephanie, you are initiating in fact finder 7, 8, 9, or 10. And so is our CEO, David Kolbe. What does that look like?
What's really interesting about that is you would think, oh, we're actually both 8s in fact finder. So you'd look at that and say, those two people are going to be exactly the same. And there are a lot of similarities about the way we take action. Obviously, we are both going to get into lots of detail. We've both worked hard to become experts in certain things. And so certainly we can provide lots of detail and information. We need data to make decisions, all of those kinds of things. But just because two people have the same strength or even the exact same number, it's going to play out differently because of 3 parts of the mind, right? So David and I, when we're at our best, he's going to do the things that he does well, right? As CEO, he's a lawyer by experience and background. And so if it's a legal thing, I'm not going to try to go do research on something that is a legal issue. I'm going to leave that to him. So what works well is if you can kind of have some of that separation between tasks and duties and those kinds of things, and then it becomes less of an issue some of the time. But I'm sure Eric would love to tell you about all the times that it could become an issue, right? This is kind of what cognitive cloning is all about.
Yeah. So as Stephanie mentioned, right, you would expect the same things and you do see the same things. Like as an example, if I throw the same problem at Stephanie and David, they're both going to go off and do their research. They may have different resources that they feel comfortable with and using and all of that. And they're going to study it and read through it. So then when they get back together, they are both absolutely sure that they are right because they've read through all of the data, all of the research. But if the facts from one don't line up with the facts from the other, they're both absolutely right that they are correct because they did all of their research. And that's where sometimes you can start to butt heads a little bit and we say, oh, well, on page 47, paragraph 6, blah, blah, blah. And then that's when I kind of zone out. But then they go back and forth with all of their data. And so, yeah, that's where it can go wrong a little bit.
So this is how we get long meetings, right, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's always one more question. Well, wait a minute. What about this? And oh, wait, did we ever think about that? And so, things that obviously can help is setting timers, whether it's for the meeting, for specific topics, that can really help. If you have one of those fantastic 1, 2s, or 3s in fact finder in the room, that's where they can, step back, look at their big picture view and go, everybody pause. This is not getting us towards our 10-year goal, right? This is not getting us towards what we were trying to solve for. So let's kind of table that and get back on track to where we need to head.
Wonderful. Next, I would love to move on to what are some common misconceptions you hear about fact finder? I mean, the one I hear all the time from bystanders are, initiating fact finders are smarter. Stephanie, do you want to talk about that?
That's true. That's absolutely true. That's what I want to say about that.
I strongly disagree with that statement.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe you should talk about it, Eric.
Right. So Stephanie and I will jump in, right? It's not about natural intelligence, right? It's not about, if you think of something they measure in some of the other cognitive assessments, speed of processing, or some people call it G. That has no bearing on whether you're a 1 in fact finder, 10, or anywhere in between. So you can be crazy smart and be a 1 in fact finder. So you're going to get to solutions really, really quickly. Whereas let's say a 10 in fact finder, still crazy smart, still going to have to do all of that homework. This in whatever cognitive, or if you're this smart, doesn't equal a this in your fact finder score. We know that because we've done lots of research on it.
Is it too much brown nosing to say that's the case in point for that is our boss, Amy. Amy, right? She is A3 in fact finder and extremely smart, right? But I do think that there are misconceptions on, sort of both sides of the continuum, right? Sometimes people see people who naturally simplify, maybe they assume they don't read or they don't, use data, right? And that is very far from the truth. In fact, Amy's a great example of that. She reads more books than I do. I actually tend to read articles versus whole books, right? But as I kind of alluded to before, if I'm reading a book, I'm going to take a while, write down. That's one of the reasons I don't read books, because I mostly listen to them in the car. Because if I have a book, I'm going to highlight it, I'm going to make notes, I'm going to go along the way. But she really gives those great summaries and gets down to the essence and gets down to the heart of what is important in the book much sooner than I do. And she does that in our meetings too, right? As we mentioned, really stopping the debate, refocusing us on what's critical. And so when you see that in action, then you realize that, as Eric said, the cognitive is really a separate part of the mind than the conative, because there are others who don't do some of those things.
Yeah, and this, Nicole, you can speak to this. This is also something we need to look out for with young children, because those 1s, 2s, and 3s in fact finder often are in a 7 through 10 in fact finder world. And so if they don't have all of the research, all of the facts to back up whatever their argument is, they can start to feel dumb, and that's absolutely not the case. It's just, that's not the way that they get things done. They don't need all of that.
Absolutely. And they're not given opportunities all the time to demonstrate their learning but really demonstrate their learning in a way that works for them. So they might be able to solve the problem or do something, but, not doing it in a way that is natural for them can add a lot of stress to their lives and ultimately make them very unsuccessful. So you're absolutely right, Eric. And we often see that because teachers we see tend to have a 7 through 10 in fact finder. So they create environments and classrooms and things, and the system is sort of built to work really well for people with that strength. And so the people who fall outside of that can sometimes not be as successful in those environments, but it's good to remember that we have, in a general population, just as many initiating or 7, 8, 9s, and 10s in fact finder as we do 1 through 3s in fact finder. So just because in certain environments it might seem unbalanced, get out into the world and then we can see sort of the variety that's out there and find places where they can be successful. So I absolutely love remembering that as well. All right, so today we focus just on fact finder, which we know is not the only action mode. So go ahead, and Stephanie, can you remind us why it's important to look at all 4 of your strengths, not just the one in fact finder?
Sure. Yeah. So there are 12 Kolbe strengths, but there are 4 that are most natural for us. And so when you get your Kolbe A index result, you get all 4 of those. And people do tend to sometimes focus on the first one because it's the first one, or they focus on one that is their longest line, but all 4 of your strengths are just as important. They are equally sort of potent to each other. They just have, sort of different strengths to them. And so I'm excited that we get a chance to go through all 4 of the action modes. And so everybody gets a chance to look at the strengths that they have in each mode.
Thank you both, Stephanie and Eric, for your wisdom today. As Stephanie mentioned, we're going to be releasing episodes for all 4 of our Kolbe Action Modes. So stay tuned for our follow through, quick start, and implementer episodes. And if you haven't already done so, go to Kolbe.com and take the Kolbe A index to see what strength you have in fact finder. And if you're interested in working with a Kolbe consultant, we have a global listing on Kolbe.com so you can find somebody in your area to work with you individually or with your team. Have a great day.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.